My relationship with my dad is amazing.
I don't know what that was.
Okay, my name is Patrick Bogey. I'm a senior, graduating senior, biology major at Oakwood University. When I just now I'm pursuing medicine in hopes of becoming a surgeon, but I also have this passion for music, specifically for playing the violin. So my nickname is Dr.Violin, just to embrace both those platforms. I was born in New York, where I lived for most of my life, and then at age 13, I moved to Ivory Coast, West Africa, where I currently live now. And so I definitely can't wait to go back home. Definitely to visit, but yeah, that's a little about me. Yeah, my father has an incredible story. He was born in Ivory Coast, West Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, where I currently said I live. I remember he was just out there in Ivory Coast, just that's where he was born, that's where he lived. And one day a missionary came over from the U.S. An Adventist missionary came over, Uncle Larry. Shout out to Uncle Larry. Who just was telling him about Oakwood. My father had made plans to go to France, and Uncle Larry was like, "No, you need to come to the U.S. You need to come to Oakwood." So with that, my dad was just set on Oakwood, and he started selling books, doing canvassing out in Ivory Coast, till he was able to raise enough money to finally get over to Huntsville, Alabama, which he had never been to before in his life. And definitely was a jump, just in his culture and his family culture, and just in the culture out there for somebody so young to be so ambitious and head out to the U.S. to unknown territory when a lot was happening at that time, just with racism and things like that they were hearing about on TV. And yeah, he came to Oakwood University. While he was here, his first semester, I remember he was telling me that he ran out of money his first semester. And at that point, for an international student, you run out of money, things are really difficult because it's like, where do you turn from there? I remember he stepped into the president's office at the time after repeated attempts. And basically just after praying really hard, the president at the time, Dr. Calvin Rock, he told him, "Listen, I'm an international student." And basically started explaining a lot of his situation. And before he could really get to the details of what was going on, Dr. Rock, I remember he told me he was looking out the window and looked back at him and said, "We never had a student from Ivory Coast before. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to give you a full scholarship." And I remember my dad told me he was just so overwhelmed. He was just so moved. He went out to the soccer field and he, just in tears, just thankful to God that God blessed him like that. And yeah, my middle name is Calvin because of that moment. So that's pretty incredible. My dad, God was so good. My dad went on to get his master's in accounting, went on to get his PhD in accounting, went on to get his CPA, and was here. He was here in the U.S. for about 30 years. Of course, at Oakwood, he met my mom, my wonderful mom, and yeah, somewhere along the way, I popped out. My two brothers, we came out, and after being here for 30 years, I remember I was 13 in high school. Like feeling pretty settled in. And my dad just decided it was time to go back home after some planning that he was doing for a few years. And that's what brought me to Ivory Coast when he moved the whole family with him in 2012. I thought it was beyond me. Like, I remember in New York, when you're in New York, you only move to two places when you're in New York, at least that I saw. People are either going to Florida or they're going to Atlanta. I've never heard somebody saying we're going from New York to West Africa, to Ivory Coast, West Africa. That's just unheard of. And that's exactly what my father did. And I remember it was just, man, it was just big. It was just, I couldn't even fathom it. I remember just being so shocked, being like, what's next? Just not fear of the unknown, just being afraid. And I remember for a long time, I was just like, Dad, what are you doing? Like, why are you putting me in this position where you're taking me from people that I love? What I'm saying? People that I've grown up around, the only culture that I really knew. And just looking in retrospect, I'm like, why not? Why not take me from the culture I grew up around to find out literally the reason why I'm black. What I'm saying? To meet my family out there in Ivory Coast, connect with the culture that's in my blood that I never really understood or realized. Like why wouldn't you take me out of the environment I was in New York to be in a place where I can learn a new language? Now I'm fluent in French. Why wouldn't you take me to a new environment where I can where I'm around people that come from completely different backgrounds? And I'm talking about internationally. I'm talking about Ivory Coast. I was like close friends with people from France and Dominican Republic and just all over the African continent. I'm talking like South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, just all over the place. Like my mind was open when I went to Ivory Coast. And I remember the way that shaped our relationship was that a lot of the time it mirrored the relationship I feel like God has with a lot of us. He takes us through twists and turns a lot. And we don't really understand what's up, and we're really confused as to God. Why would you do this, and why would you do this now? And why would you do this at all sometimes? And that's kind of what Ivory Coast meant for me, and it kind of showed me that, listen, there's somebody that's above you that's looking at the positivity that comes out of the situation, that understands what you're able to go through when you get through that situation. They understand what you're able to endure, and that's why they put it upon you, just so that you can be a better person and be a better instrument, just to positively impact society. And so that really shaped my relationship because it gave me a new level of trust and respect for my dad, especially to go back and see where he came from, to see where he worked from, to see his family culture, and how he was able, by God's grace, just to allow God to use him to do amazing things out of that. And so, that Ivory Coast was probably one of the hugest things that had an impact on just the relationship I had with my dad and how I understand him and how I relate to him, and just the respect that I have for such an incredible human being. Yeah, I have some like incredible memories just of my father. He's always been the person that with his strength he's carried us around. He supported us, and it just means so much. As I grew older, just into a teenager, into a man, there's a lot of times we didn't see eye to eye. All in love, but we just didn't see eye to eye. We never had a bad relationship, but it was just as I grew up, and I think a lot of that is because I'm like him in a lot of ways. But I'll give you an example. So, for example, when we got ready to move to Ivory Coast, I remember when he broke the news to us. I was just shocked. I was settled, and you tell a freshman in high school in New York, like you're moving to Ivory Coast, West Africa. That's big. And I felt like he wasn't feeling me, like he wasn't seeing me, he wasn't taking us into account and things like that. But come to find out, years later, that was the best move for my life, and that's what God wanted, because my father was a spiritual man, and even now, as I'm here at Oakwood, it's scary. I meet some of his old friends. They're like, man, you say that just like your father. You act just like your father. And I feel like a lot of times that we didn't see eye to eye was because he saw himself in me and was kind of just correcting, a lot of the things that he had in my age and just helping me to be a better person. And so, yeah, definitely just my father was just incredible in that aspect. It's so funny when you're a kid, you're like, I will never. You look at your parents, you're like, I'll never be like that. Like, that's not me. That's not what I'm going for. And I think that's justifiable, as a kid, people, and your parents are always cool. Like, don't get it twisted. But, people, like your friends are, quote unquote cooler, than your parents, There are people that were close to my age that were cooler. And there were a lot of things that my dad did that I thought was weird. Now as I'm getting older, it's frightening. It's frightening because I'm seeing how a lot of his tendencies, like subconsciously and unconsciously, like somebody would have to point it out. Yo, that's something that Frederick would do. That's something, man, you act just like your dad. And I'm like, yo, that's a little scary because that male figure that God set up in my household, I'm mirroring him in so many ways. Of course, I got my little quirks and I got my little tweaks, and there are a lot of ways that I'm different. But like fundamentally, like. You put Patrick and Frederick side by side. It's just Frederick in 2019, like just with different, the way it shaped me, just as I head into parenthood and will shape the type of parent I will be, is that it set up a standard for me when it comes to my children, to be very protective of what they put in their minds. My father was that type. It came from him being conservative, and it came from him just being a good Christian man. My father, growing up, he was very, very careful about what he let get into our minds. We were, and to an extent, you can look at it and be like, whoa, that's a little too much. We would be watching TV. It gets to a scene where, there's a kiss. It's TV. There's a kissing scene, you know what I'm saying? And then, he would, my father used to get upset. He used to always do something. He'd pick up the remote, like very intentionally, point it at the TV and flip the channel and be like, get off my TV. Like I never. That's a quote from my father. Like get off my TV. We would use the internet every time he would pay the bill. He would call my brothers. He would call my brothers into the living room, and he would tell us, "I just paid the bill on the internet. There's a lot of good, and there's a lot of good. There's a lot of good, and there's a lot of bad you can find on the internet. Be very careful with what you're choosing to watch and what you're choosing to scroll through." And he was just, I mean, I think that was probably one of the most important lessons he taught me. So the way it's going to shape me as a parent is that's one thing I will never let go when it comes to my children. Those standards of just being careful with the power of choice that you have, of what you let into your body, what you let into your system, what you let into your mind, where you communicate with God, your mind. I think that's one thing that I'm going to emphasize as much as he emphasized when we were under his care, and even now. It's funny. I'm progressive. I'm not conservative, but I have a lot of conservative values that I know only came from my dad. You know what I'm saying? So he's probably next level with it. But a lot of things that I was like, nah, that's cool. Now I look at it and I'm like, oh, and I'm not talking specifically about, church or anything like that. I'm just talking about in general in life, manners of dressing, manners of talking, manners of doing a lot of things. There's a lot of conservative values that he passed on to me. And I definitely see myself as a parent, instilling those type of values in my home, for my children and everyone. And so, I think it's exciting. It's a scary thought. You really don't know what to expect as a future parent. But I know a lot of it is going to be a mirror of just what Frederick Bogey gave me. It's so funny. You talk about a West African household. When I was in high school, the rule, my father used to set his foot down. No dating, no, like none of that. Focus on your books. All you got to worry about is your books, which a lot of the times we hear all the time. Now just being in college as I've grown, you're in a relationship now. I have a girlfriend, and now I remember, it's so funny because you go from high school, no dating, and then when you get to college, it's supposed to be some switch that just goes off, and it's like, okay, well now it's okay. I remember it kind of felt like he was getting nervous. Sophomore year sophomore year of college, that's when he started dating my mom. I remember when it hit my sophomore year, I remember he used to, ask me a lot of questions. And he didn't necessarily ask the questions, but he would beat around the bush by giving me advice. For example, don't bring a girl home with long nails, like, like stuff like that. Just to kind of hint towards, I know you're transitioning, like tell me something, and things like that. And I remember even bringing up to him just my relationship with my girlfriend. It was so funny. It was so funny just seeing how he reacted. Oh, okay. Well, it's just seeing the divine. Like my mom was like, "Oh, that's good. I'm praying for you. She seems nice. This, that, and the third." My dad was like, "Oh, well, whoa, okay. Well, we'll see. Yeah, well, I taught you, and just there was I could kind of tell, but all that I think that adds to the dynamic of our relationship. I know it comes from a place of love and support. I'm not angry at it. I more laugh at it than anything, and I'm just grateful for moments like that. Just also on the whole aspect of growth. When I was growing up in church, my dad was all on that. Don't touch the drums. Don't. I think that came from a conservative spot, but he was very apprehensive to me being around musicians. Mind you, he got me started on the violin. He introduced me to music. He bought my violin. He wanted me to do that. But he was very cautious when it came to music, and I think that came from a very protective place in his heart. Just seeing the route that a lot of his musician friends went on, and a lot of things that he saw growing up in church, and just with his friends in general. And I remember always feeling like I couldn't fully express myself around my dad when it came to music. Like I couldn't always do everything that I wanted to do. Transition to now, just with me doing my thing, like as Dr.Violin, going around literally the country, making, just producing income off of my gift. Now he's open to it. I would tell my father, for example, when I did recording work with Israel Houghton in California, that was big. I had to tell my dad, hey dad, Israel Houghton found me and I'm going to California and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you can imagine just having that transition. And I remember he was just like, if you prayed about it and you feel like it's the right thing for you to do, then you have my support on it. And your mother and I just want to know that you're safe. That was huge for me because it went from a straight no to I respect you as a man, I respect your decisions. And and my dad is just giving me incredible advice. I mean, incredible advice about so many things. My humility, the reason I can't go to places and just act deep is because I seen my father get the PhD, the CPA. I seen my father, after, working, literally working his way from another continent to come here and just be successful and all this stuff. And I see him go back and how he interacts with people. It doesn't matter what their educational background is. It doesn't matter how they might treat him. My father's he's always been like extremely humble. That's one of the biggest lessons he taught me. My dad cooked for us when my mom couldn't. I seen my dad go out and do the laundry. I seen my dad take the trash out. You know what I'm saying? I seen him do all these things that set the example for me as a man. And so, yeah, it's just things like that, man. He just really shaped me into who I am. One of the biggest lessons he gave me, of course, he's a very spiritual man. He always told me, make sure, but not the typical put God first. Like, he showed me how. It was things like that that I've taken with me now, why I can't take my relationship with God for granted. But one of the biggest things he told me, he never told me to look for my friends. A lot of times we hear that, be careful who you choose as your friends. He never told me to look for my friends. What my father did, he told me, if you want somebody good, he said, Patrick, you need to be a good person yourself. That is completely revolutionized my life. I've never, to this day, I've never chosen a friend. I've never cut anybody off. I've just chosen to be a good person, and people that weren't good cut themselves off. I've chosen to be a good person, and people that were good, like just the law of attraction, they've come to me. And so my dad is really set up. I mean, literally, when he set up that standard, I think it's so monumental, just to a lot of the success that God has been able to give me in my life. And so I'm just so grateful for the relationship I have with him and how it's grown and everything he's taught me. A lot of times I find myself in situations, and it's crazy. I would always, when I take time to just kind of think it over, I ask myself, what would my pops do? Like, what would my dad do in this situation? Especially when it comes to like professional things and relating to people and in the professional world. I always ask myself, what would my father do? My father has an incredible ability just to relate to folks and just to, I don't know how he does it. It's just an innate gift. Like, he steps up in the spot, and like it's like God's favor just follows him. And I believe that some of that was bestowed upon me by God's grace. That everywhere I go, the blessings that were from Frederick Bogey, those blessings have come down on me, and that's something that I'm really grateful for. In terms of challenges that I experience now, as a byproduct of the relationship with my dad, if I'm just being transparent, it's the pressure to live up to what he's done. My father has an incredible story. The way that he worked, in Ivory Coast, as a young man, and just took the plane for the first time to go to a place that he was never at, and then he comes here and just literally rips the place up. I remember he was part of USM here at Oakwood when he arrived. Then he went on, he got his master's, then he got his PhD, then he got his CPA, and then he had the family, and he handled his family so well. And then he went back, now in hopes of just having, doing his business endeavors out in Ivory Coast to give back everything that he's learned. I look at that and I'm just like, man, that is incredible. So now the challenge for me, as a man, because I know that that's the standard that that God set. It's like, man, like how do I live in that? How do I live in those shoes? My dad has great plans, and the Lord has placed great things on his heart. So a lot of times I find myself, really just standing back, and it's like, God, like how do you want me to pursue that in the future? Like how do you want me to how do I live up to that standard? How do I fit in those shoes, having done so much, having blazed the trail like so deeply? Like what do I do? So that's a personal challenge of mine at this point. Like, my dad he's been so incredible. He's been present. Nobody's perfect, but he's always been present, and I was grateful for that and everything that he's done. So now it's just living up to that. I think that's a challenge for me. Yeah, I think the the role of just the father figure in society is just of the utmost importance. You cannot remove that figure of just a male leadership. You can't take him out of society. When we look at the stats, I can't quote exact numbers from off my head, But when you look at the people that are in prison, the males and the females alike, and they'll tell you about what it was like growing up for them, in the family, and how a lot of their family was broken and things like that. I feel like that plays major roles, because the danger of that is when you remove that male figure, that strong male figure, from the household, when you take him out, and he can't show the next generation of a man what it means to be a man, what it means to lead, what it means to talk to a girl like she's a queen, what it means to be to work and just provide for your family. When you take that out of the home, you're left with with the media just to influence this next generation, and what the media is glorifying isn't the best, because the media is glorifying the womanizing, the media is glorifying the drugs, it's glorifying all types of things that are taken away from the moral values of society. I think that the presence of a father figure, to show the next generation of boys what it means to be a king, and show the next generation of girls what it means just to be a queen, because I believe that he plays major roles in the lives of the daughter as well. I think that we would have a lot less problems in society with a strong and correct male figure presence. And so, I mean, to me, it's of the utmost importance. You can't remove it from society, and so yeah, man. Yeah, Sam, I see why at least people get emotional. Okay, you need to calm down. What's wrong with you? Sheesh. All right, we got it. Dear Dad, man, just thank you so much for everything that you've done. I remember from jump when I was young. You were always there for me. I remember specifically memories of you taking us to the park to go shoot basketball. I remember you had this weird form of you just putting the ball like right here over your head and shooting, and it used to go in, and I was shocked. I remember seeing you play soccer at the park. I remember you teaching me, how to ride my bike. I remember, so many things that you did. I remember, just the discipline that you gave me that shaped me, like even to who I am today, even though I didn't like it at the time. I remember you teaching me the values of respect, values that I take with me from to this day. I remember, Dad, every single morning, Dad, we had to say good morning to you. And if we didn't say good morning to you, you used to get upset. Now I realize you weren't so stuck on good morning. It's not really what it was. But to this day, whenever I see an authoritative figure or anybody in the spot, I always acknowledge them. And that's a lot of things that my friends don't do. A lot of my people that I know don't do. But it set me apart professionally because you taught me the values of respect. Dad, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. We were here, in the U.S. growing up in New York, and for a lot of time I was closed-minded. But you brought me to a new culture, a completely new culture, new values, new language. Maintenant je parle français à cause de toi. See, if I didn't move, out of my comfort zone, I would never be where I'm at today. And there's so many things that I can't even begin to express how grateful and how thankful I am for you. Really, dang, Sam. Oh man, it really, when I found out that you couldn't come for my graduation, that was tough. But I know that it's because you have the best in mind, just with money and just staying back home, to look after Gerard and stuff like that, to make sure that he's good. But it's just I want to let you know that May 11th at his graduation, I'll be walking across that stage with you in mind. Thank you for everything that you've done. I can't say thank you enough, man. I would say it a million times, but just thank you for being so incredible and just shaping me into who I am. So, merci, Papa.